Okay, I think we're live here. Welcome everyone. If you're joining us, would you mind just commenting and let me know you can hear me okay and you can see me okay. Now, so we're going to be chatting with Tom Darcy tonight. Tom wanted to come on and do a quick interview about something he's involved in at the moment. A lot of you might have seen the press conference that took place in Dublin last week. So we'll bring Tom in a second, but can everybody hear me okay? See if there are any comments there. I'm hoping you can hear me. All right, well, let's bring in Tom anyway. Tom, oh, the audio is dreadful. Someone is telling me. Oh, no, that's not good. Anybody else?
Before I even say a word.
Yeah, well, yours is okay, supposedly. Well, let's see. Can everybody hear Tom? Well, first of all, I've known Tom maybe for the guts of about 10 years now. And right. Ever since I've known him, he's been involved in taking on the banks and the Vulture funds and exposing a lot of the corruption going on in that area. He's the author of 2 books, Waiting for the Sheriff, and more recently, Irish Tears, A Nation Betrayed. So, Tom, just come in and say hello. And maybe just for anybody that doesn't know you and doesn't know what you've been up to for the last decade or so, maybe give us a little introduction to yourself.
Okay, for those that don't know me, originally I was a property developer, found myself broke after spending nearly 200,000 euros of legal costs, and ended up having to study law and banking, and lost my home. There was a violent eviction. My eldest son was knocked unconscious, and ultimately fought the courts as a lay litigant in person, and culminating in 2013, winning for the first time in history as a lay litigant in the Supreme Court. I got back my home and properties. And then I became what I call an accidental actionist, where people seen that I had managed, and still the only person has managed to beat the system. But I seen the criminality, and I knew that there was very few options for people. So I decided to co-found Right to Homes, which was a non-for-profit company, a guarantee, seeking to fund people who unfortunately are denied access to justice. Wrote the first book, ran as an MEP candidate to identify and out the criminality that was being perpetrated in the forecourts and what the banks were truly doing. And then during COVID, separate to this, I wrote 3 separate books, but under a different name. But I also wrote Irish Tears, A Nation Betrayed. And I told a story of what happened after the first book. And the first book, ironically, was supported by the Catholic Church, the first in the history of the world. It was raised in the Dáil. No other book managed to achieve that. I ran ads on the Wall Street Journal, on USA Today, exposing the corruption of the Irish banks. Ran an ad on RTE for 2 months offering free mortgage checks to 3 million Irish mortgage holders and business holders, and identified within 2 weeks 12 billion euros in overcharging on fixed, variable, tracker and prime. That affected every person in this country. Very quickly I was closed down by, of all things, the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority of the UK, in conjunction with the Central Bank of Ireland. And that wasn't newsworthy, or anything I've ever done is not considered as newsworthy. So I have been fighting the civil process for 15 years and realized, after basically exhausting everything that there is possibly you can do in the courts, that it was a waste of time, because you're open to the opinion of a judge. And unfortunately, while I've had judges recuse themselves, the issue is that you don't know the politics. You don't know who's in their favor. You don't know whether or not they are incumbent or they're compromised financially, as I exposed in my first book on numerous judges who were seriously compromised. And in one stage, when I got a judge to recuse himself, he did because the people, his creditors, were actually standing in the court seeking relief from him. So again, while I know and I can master myself around the forecourts, it truly was a waste of time. So 2 years ago, I started to study criminal law and started to assign the normal process of how a vulture fund purchases your loan from the originator and original bank, and what laws were broken. And I had an infinite amount of civil laws, but I wanted the criminal laws. And that's how last week culminated after 2 years dealing a lot with An Garda Síochána, and I have to appreciate their patience, to recognize the abundance of criminal laws that have been breached, violated, and deliberately ignored by government state bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Tom, that might be a good opportunity to hop in. I want to play a little bit, just a minute or so from that press conference last week. Now, I apologize in advance for the quality of this. It's not my recording. There is going to be, I believe, a proper quality recording coming out at some point. I don't know, in time you can tell us about that, Tom. But let me just see if I can share my screen here, play a little bit of that for a minute.
This is the first time in the history of the state that an investigation has been initiated by An Garda Síochána into a government department. The consequences of this criminal investigation will not only impact the financial markets, but will have a catastrophic effect on the international stock market and securities being traded across the world. I will outline later the criminal allegation. As criminal law supersedes civil law, our criminal investigation should stop every eviction, repossession and auction across Ireland, where the evidence of Tailte Éireann is relied on. It should stop all legal proceedings in every court in Ireland where third parties have initiated proceedings based on the evidence, the fraudulent, fabricated evidence produced by Tailte Éireann. As fraud removes statute, I expect every person who lost their home, their loved ones, their businesses, or their properties because of the criminal actions of the Property Registration Authority will demand justice.
Okay. Okay, so Tom, that was a press conference there last week, and you were sitting at the table there with independent journalist Deegan and filmmaker Jim Sheridan.
Correct.
Now, I don't know, do you want to just comment here, because you did send out an invite to all the mainstream media. Just tell us who turned up.
Well, unfortunately, nobody did, with the exception of two friends of Liam Deegan. Now, Liam is a renowned journalist. He is fearless, and he has constantly exposed criminality. He was responsible for numerous exposés that were done. But in regard to the mainstream media, I appreciate that what I'm doing is not politically advantageous, and it's certainly not beneficial to the financial institutions.
Yeah, of course not. Now, you said a lot of very interesting things in that press release. The main thing you wanted to talk about today, by the way, is something that you're launching. It's a free downloadable information pack for people who, after hearing this press conference and hearing you speak tonight, will want to look into this and maybe go about taking legal action themselves against Tailte Éireann for what you say are criminal behaviour, criminal actions. So we'll get to that shortly, but maybe before that, you might tell us a little bit about Tailte Éireann, who they are, what they do, and what are these criminal actions that you're alleging that they've been involved in.
They changed the name of the Property Registration Authority of Ireland just before Christmas. Whether or not that was timing, I don't know, because I started the criminal investigation in my first approach to a Garda station in around the same time, and that was in Cavan Town Garda station. of all places. But then the Property Registration Authority of Ireland was changed into Tailte Éireann, but it doesn't make any difference in what their focus or function is. They are supposed to, which in accordance to the 1964 Registration of Title Act, adhere to the normal process and procedure of the registration of properties. Unfortunately, for 60 years, they adopt the same policy with everyone, would accept vulture funds, which led me then to look at the specific forms that they were ignoring, omitting. And while they were seeking to rely on practice directions or whether they were directed by another department, I don't know. But one thing I do know is that the legislation didn't change. And even today, I was looking at somebody's Form 56 who bought a property in the same manner as somebody did 50, 40, 20 years ago. And it was processed exactly the same. So the issue I had was, why would a government department automatically adopt and abandon a standard mandatory regulatory requirement when filling out a government form? It would be akin to basically deciding when you're taking your driving license application to not filling it out, or not putting in your date of birth, or not putting in whether you're over 17 or whether or not you have medical issues, and not even signing it. And then processing that, and all of a sudden in the post you find yourself with a spanking brand new driving license. It was absolutely bizarre. But I focused on the criminality of what they were doing. And it led me very quickly to find out that Tailte Éireann, while they are a government body, it would seem that two individuals that I identified within my criminal allegation, who I've now been informed have moved from Tailte Éireann in the last week. And plus the website of Tailte Éireann has been down since my press statement last week, which is again coincidental. But you have to ask yourself, why are they not filling out the forms? And not to fill out a form, some people might consider it to be, just an error, an oversight. But when you're talking about 60, 80, 100,000 applications to Tailte Éireann by vulture funds, then you question, oh, well, why are they doing this? Why are they not putting in the fundamental requirements on Form 56, which is to identify the registered charge holder? Why not? Why not tell the people who it is? Secondly, why not tell everybody how much a property was purchased for? And then secondly, why not tell everybody how much the liability of the revenue is in stamp duty? Or why not register the solicitor or who vetted this money that was paid for? So that led me very quickly to identify that if they're not registering how much was paid, well, that comes into theft and fraud on the basis that I don't know how much my properties were paid for, which is denying me my rights and property. It's denying me where somebody has paid for something and now claiming for something else in a different value, which is fraud. And when you aid fraud, whether it's intentional or not, and you conspire, whether it's intentional or not, you're as guilty as the person who's committing the offense. I also could identify that Tailte Éireann backdated, and I used Tailte Éireann's own evidence against them. So I would find it difficult to accept or believe that they won't be charged when you consider that I downloaded folios, which is the registration of my own properties, for 24 months consecutively. And on the 25th month, Tailte Éireann backdated the registration by 2.5 years. Now that's like backdating your driving license because you got stopped by a guard, or backdating your passport, or backdating your insurance policy. It's illegal. It's fraud. And you have to ask yourself, well, why would Tailte Éireann do that? Well, when you look at the legislation, Section 62, subsection 1 of the Registration of Title Act clearly states that power or interest is not conveyed until the party is registered. So in my case, we had everyday DAC who allegedly were registered for 2.5 years when in fact they weren't. And during that period, they were issuing proceedings, thousands of proceedings up and down the country. They were getting hundreds of judgments. They were making people bankrupt. They were appointing receivers. They were getting sheriffs to win and break into family homes. And all of that was done illegally. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. But the great thing is we're not reliant on the judges in the forecourts, in the civil process. This is now a very serious, and as An Garda Síochána said, possibly the biggest thing that has happened in criminal law in the last 20 to 30 years.
Wow. And this criminal case that you're taking, is it just against Tailte Eireann, or is it like, did the Vulture funds come into this at all? Because obviously, you know, maybe you'd explain how they work and some of the problems with Vulture funds.
Well, again, going back to Form 56, and this was just a start. Form 56 denied me the right to know who bought my properties. Now, I don't know any contract in the world where you're forced into a contract with a third party that you don't know, and then you're given what's known as a service provider who's claiming to own the loans. So in my criminal statement, I had researched every day, as I've researched every Vulture fund. And every day is only a service provider. They're also registered in the company's registration office. So I was able to print down their year-ending financial returns for 2017, 18, 19, all the way up to this year, or sorry, 23. And I could see, according to the media and according to Everyday and the hello and goodbye letter that I got from AIB and then Everyday, they claimed they had bought my loans. But yet their financial records for the year ending 6 months after they allegedly bought my loans, and remember my loans was part of the Joshua tranche, that 200 million in assets was purchased. Yet Everyday's assets didn't increase by 5%, didn't reflect any more than 2 million euros increase. But more importantly, they didn't have the funding to buy 200 million euros worth because they approximately had 32 million on the books. And at the end of the year, they had 32 million on the books, which meant that they didn't pay for anything. So it was a complete and utter fraud. And then they appointed their servicing agents. So we have a company who allegedly has bought 200 million euros worth of assets, but their financial returns show they didn't. So they're either falsifying their company records with the CRO, or they're totally misrepresenting fact and truth in the courts of Ireland and every person who they allegedly they have purchased their loans. So last year we had Everyday purchasing Promotoria's loans. And once again, that's not reflected in their financial returns. So that is part of my criminal statement. And everything I have done in the last 15 years has been done altruistically. Everything I do, I have on my website, waitingforthesheriff.com, I have free downloads of GDPR and freedom of information and affidavits and all of that. But Liam and myself, Liam Deegan, we decided to put up an information pack firstly and a video that's accompanied to it to show people, first of all, that their Vulture fund didn't purchase their loans. And that should be sensational news for every person before the courts, every mortgage holder who's being charged exorbitant interest rates. It should be on every newspaper in Ireland. The question is, I suppose I would ask, is why not? I have irrefutable evidence. Anybody can garnish it. You can download your Vulture fund. It doesn't matter whether it's Have Bell or Tanager or Lone Star or Promontory or Everyday or whoever. My last count was nearly 60 Vulture funds, but their financial returns is very easily identified in the CRO. And you can make your criminal complaint on that. You can make a criminal complaint against Tailte Éireann on their failure, which, you know, it's an abuse of office. It results in perjury before the courts, because these are the evidence that are fundamental in any statement of claim. They're claiming to be the lawful owner. They've claimed they suffered an injury, but they're not the person who bought it. And which leads me then to a much graver and bigger criminal action. When you conceal where a person purchases something, particularly property, we have a situation in Ireland now where we have third-party, unknown, anonymous, unnamed entities who have purchased properties in Ireland. Could be subversive, could be a cartel, could be the Kinahan Group, could be anybody, but yet they're not identified. Now, that falls in the remit, because of the actions of Tailte Éireann, it falls into the remit of the Money Laundering Anti-Terrorism Act of 2010. Now, I have stated that in my allegation. And of course, proof of that is the fact that the real owner, Slim Shady would say, please stand up. But we don't. We have service providers who tomorrow they can be terminated by the real owner and another service provider appointed.
Wow. Okay. Just on Vulture funds again. I mean, mainstream media. Let me just pop this up here for a second. This is an article. I forget the journalist's name actually. The private investors are willing to put money in. Why on earth would we say no to these Vulture funds? Here's one I just somebody sent me today. Vulture funds now own more student accommodation in Dublin than DCU, UCD, and Trinity combined. So yeah, who are these Vulture funds, and why are they buying up all of our property and land? Tom, just before we get into more detail on that package that you want people to download, will you just tell us, who is this for? Who will this be of benefit to, and what benefit can they hope to achieve from making this, going down this path and making this criminal complaint?
It affects every individual in the country. It doesn't matter whether you're before the courts or not. If you look at last year, 6,000 properties, over 6,000 properties were purchased by Vulture funds. The average amount of properties that are sold in any given year is about 7,500 to 8,000. So they're buying up almost 80% of the properties, which leaves no properties for young couples or single people or anybody to buy. They have monopolized the market. They're controlling the market. They prevent anyone entering into the market, and they're charging exorbitant rents. But the bigger problem is where's the rents going? Ironically, we have the citizens of Ireland paying these rents, and they don't even know, because most of these are either given to social people unemployed, or to immigrants or whatever, but the money doesn't go into Ireland. It goes to offshore accounts. Now, you want to have a deeper look into these acquisitions of properties. So we have unknown third parties purchasing and controlling the rents in Ireland. They are now the biggest landlord in Ireland. They were invited in originally by Fine Gael and the Labour Party, and everybody thought it was brilliant. But if you actually look at what happened, they were bestowed charitable status, so they don't pay tax. They're an offshore company. We don't know who the real owner is. And here we have them charging couples and families who are trying to eke out a living. And in the last 2 years, they've had to suffer household bills and utilities and everything else going up through the roof. We've mortgages gone up by an average of 8 to 1,500 euros a month. Yet the government offer people a double a week there last week, or they give them 300 euros rebate, and everybody thinks it's marvelous. They don't realize that 2 grand a month has gone up in the last 14 months. 2 grand a month gone up, and they get back 300. It's a complete ulcer. But who does it affect? It affects everyone. It affects students. It affects anybody that's trying to get a property. It affects anybody paying these absolute extortionate rates. We're paying the highest rate of interest in the world, never mind Europe, for a mortgage. And we're told that we're lucky to be paying this. When you consider the equivalent 400,000 euro mortgage in France would be approximately 600 euros less a month than we're paying here in Ireland. And remembering, we pay the highest bailout in the world.
Yeah.
The Irish taxpayers did, still paying it, paying 5 billion a year in interest. And again, the highest rate of interest for that 64 billion. No other European country paid the interest rate that we are. Some of them even got half the interest rate, which means that we should be only paying 2.5 billion a year. But all of this has been kept completely and utterly quiet because there is way too many people. If you look at Enda Kenny, he was.
We lost you, Tom. We may have lost Tom there. Okay, I think we've lost Tom. Let me play a little bit of this press conference for a second and see if we can get Tom back. Bear with me now. Just continue where I left off here.
There will be no doubt as a consequence of the criminal investigation, tens of thousands of individuals will issue civil cases, and class actions will be taken against Irish Vulture funds, their servicing agents, and all those guilty of aiding and abetting Irish Vulture funds in the theft, fraud, and larceny, perjury, the perversion of course of justice, in the unlawful seizure of Irish family homes, properties, businesses, farms, and goods. Just to explain now for the first time, I started this 2 years ago with one thing. Our government and past governments invited vulture funds into this country. And since they came here, they financially raped our country. They've evicted our mothers and children. They have created in excess of 9,000 additional families and people homeless. When I started this, there was 376 people homeless. Today, there's 14,000, 4,000 of which are children. When I started this, the average mortgage that was being paid was between 6%, now it's 10%. That's 2,000 euros extra a month to the average person. When I started this first, you could buy a home because they had no value at all. So I'd advise the system to use the laws of this state to enforce the law. And I'm going to give you a very simple strategy that works, because I had very difficulty in explaining to An Garda Síochána what happened. So, as a matter of an exercise, I'll ask you and everybody what.
You have Tom? Yeah, you have Tom back. You there, Tom?
Sorry about that. Don't know what happened.
You're okay. Just listen to a little bit more of that press release. And by the way, I'll put a link to that press release into the description of this video. As you've seen there, it's very poor quality. Tom, you might actually have a better version that you might be able to send me at some point on your phone there. I think.
Yeah, Jim Sheridan, actually, his film crew were there. They filmed it. Unfortunately, I'm responsible for the bad quality, but we can't do everything perfectly.
No, not that for sure. So I'm not sure where we lost you there, but I suppose, yeah, you were just telling us like who this can maybe help, and how will it help them? Like, what sort of benefit can people hope to see from getting involved with this campaign and initiating criminal proceedings?
Well, what I was hoping would be that, first of all, I call it a global movement, because every country are going through what we're going through. We have vulture funds across the world who are ultimately pension funds, who most of these pension funds are not aware that they've invested into the misery and persecution of people around the world. You have the likes of the firefighters or New York Police Department involved in Service, which is one of the largest pension funds, but they're investing in toxic loans here in Ireland. And they're totally unaware of what's happening. So I would expect that this criminal investigation is going to affect their share value. I would expect straight away that these vulture funds will want to depart from this country and every other country where criminal actions have been initiated to expose criminally what's happening. And it's no longer a civil matter. I would hope, as criminal law supersedes civil law, that every case before the courts, every judgment that was obtained, every order of execution for possession, every appointment of a receiver, where Tailte Éireann, or the Property Registration Authority of Ireland's evidence was relied on, it is the fundamental requirement, and all of them were obtained contrary to law. They require, as much as I've heard so many different people make their own personal opinion, I've heard some people saying that, well, the banks are allowed to do what they can do. And I've no difficulty in what the banks did in transferring the loan. The difficulty I have is, one, when you transfer a loan under the Judicature Act, you're supposed to get the consent of the person when you're transferring a security. They didn't get that. They were also supposed to offer to the individual on the date that the loan was cleared equity of redemption of mortgage, and they didn't get that. But let's go to the vulture funds. The vulture funds come in unnamed, allegedly by, in my case, every day, bought my loans, but it's not reflected in their financial affairs. And then they use my power of attorney to register their interest. Now, that was originally done with as is the case with every person. When you originally bought a property, you gave your limited power of attorney, so the solicitor could register on your behalf in the PRAI the interest or the charge of the original bank. And that was lawfully done or executed. Well, in some cases. But now you have a third party who you don't know, who's using your power of attorney to do exactly what the original solicitor did, but you didn't give your power of attorney. And in Ireland, as there is in 150 jurisdictions around the world, it's illegal to use a third party power of attorney. It's also illegal to omit, delete, or fail to fill in a government document. And as we've all seen at the end of every application form, whether it be a passport or an insurance policy or anything like that, a license, even a TV license, if you give false information, it can result in a prosecution. So it does affect every person in this country. And why it's not on every media outlet is beyond my understanding.
Yeah, sure, Tom. So listen, we're going to wrap it up shortly, but tell us just about this this downloadable package. Where would people go to have a look at it and download it, and what's in it, and what steps do you want people to take?
Okay, well, we're hoping to get a global movement. Ironically, every local authority around the world seems to be doing the exact same for vulture funds, which some might consider that to be an unusual act collectively. Some might even say that it's part of a conspiracy, but it's happening. What we would like to happen is that every person in this country download, you go to Waiting for the Sheriff, that's my website, and you will see, all we're asking for you to do is just register your name so we know who you are, and we can, send you updates or whatever if you want them. If you don't want them out, that's fine. And you will download a packet. You have a video that will tell you what to do. There is an instruction package that will give you the instructions to process. Literally, there's a Garda allegation statement. You can go to your local Garda station, you fill in your details, and that's it. You register your pulse number, and that's the first part. The second part is, there's 4 actually stages, I should have said that. The second document is a letter to Tailte Éireann, asking them, because of their criminal actions, to mitigate their criminal actions. You're asking them to remove the unlawful charge on your property. The third one is that you're asking the Vulture Fund to verify ownership of your loan. In other words, that they purchased it. They're the ones that wrote the check. We all know they're not, so they're not going to be able to give you that information. But it's a nice letter anyway, because you're placing them on notice for those who are facing the courts, those who have faced the courts, those who have lost their homes, those who've lost loved ones. Well, because of their criminal actions, because of the fraud that was perpetrated on them, I would hope and expect there is going to be a tsunami of people in class actions suing these service providers who deliberately, with intent, committed perjury, with intent perverted the course of justice, and possibly have created the largest fraud perpetrated on the Irish people. The fourth document is a request. It's Form 57A, and it's part of Tailte Éirann's forms under the 1964 Registration of Title Act, which requests the removal of, the officially requests the removal of the charge. Then we have a list of all the authorities and government bodies and committee and supervision companies around the world that we want to identify and notify that of this criminal investigation. The likes of the Securities Exchange Commission or the European Marketing Securities Authority, that this is happening here, that these vulture funds who are allegedly trading lawfully, their securities, the very thing that they're trading with, the registration of that security was obtained contrary to law. So it usurps and undermines the very thing they're trading. So we want the International Banking Federation to intervene. We want the European Central Bank to intervene. We want the Irish Central Bank to revoke all licenses given to these vulture funds because they're operating contrary to law. And that's the reason why I would love to see, we don't have to march on the streets. We don't have to demonstrate. We can do it from the comfort of our own home by just filling out a form. by notifying the authorities, by demanding, and as I say, this is the first time this has ever happened in the history of the state, that we have An Garda Síochána investigating government department. We've had investigations and all of that, but we've never had a government department criminally investigated because of their actions. It is a first in history, and even that alone, there should be mass coverage. So I would ask everybody who's watching this, no matter who you are or what you are, contact your local radio station, newspaper, TD, whatever your allegiance is, and ask them why this is being censored. Why has it been covered up? I've sent over 200 press statements in the last 14 days. And other than the one report that we got from the Daily Mail, and I thank the editor for doing that, but nobody else was willing to report.
Yeah, as you can imagine. Well, look, it's really, really exciting what's going on there, Tom. And I'm sure a lot of people will have a lot of hope that it might help them. A lot of people are at risk of losing their family home, or their farm, or their business. So hopefully it can really be a benefit to people. It might work. But on the other hand, you know, you look at the track record that the Gardaí have investigating certain crimes like these. So do you hold up much hope for the Gardaí to actually do their job?
Well, when I started this, I always have a strategy. And my strategy was, as soon as I got An Garda Síochána on board, then I would hit the international policing agencies. So the likes of Amapol, Interpol, Severopol, the FBI. And we already have people in the UK, so we have the London Met and New Scotland Yard involved. And ultimately, within the next couple of days, we will have the FBI or our people in America involved, and Australia. So now we have a global police investigation. Now, An Garda Síochána might be reluctant to prosecute it to the letter, but because they're the principal policing agency, now they have the eyes of the world looking at them. So I would think it'd be very difficult for them to not prosecute it to the letter of the law, particularly when you consider that these these service providers are responsible for over 4,500 people who've lost their homes. They're responsible for countless deaths by our mentally ill. They're responsible for incredible trauma to young minds. And they're also responsible for possibly the biggest breakup in families in our history. So, and their financial records show right now that they didn't buy the loans, yet they went into court, swore in affidavits that they owned the loans, and they don't. So I'd love to see how An Garda Síochána are going to get out of that one. I'd also love to see how they're going to justify that somebody in Tailte Éireann backdated the registration for 2.5 years, and I'm using Tailte Éireann's own evidence against them. So
yeah, it's fascinating. It's unbelievable, really, what they've been getting away with, and it's amazing that it's, I suppose, taken this long to get to this point. But fair play. I mean, you've got it to this point, so I'm really interested to see what's going to happen next. Maybe I'm going to just post your website here if I can. waitingforthesheriff.com, so people can go there and they'll find all the relevant information. And maybe in the next couple of weeks, Tom, if it's suited, you might come back on if there's anybody else you'd like to bring on with you, and we could have a little bit of a chat and maybe give us an update on what's happened.
Absolutely. And I'd like to say, firstly, to everybody watching, unfortunately, when I put the first post out about this, I got over 650,000 views. There was over I think it was about 20,000 messages, correspondence, emails. I just cannot get through them. I know people are sending me messages, people in desperate positions and situations, but I just physically cannot get to everyone. So apologies for that. And then secondly, I must give credit to Liam Deegan. He's been absolutely a pillar for me in this. He's part of this. We're both in it. And obviously, everybody's families suffer when you monopolize your time in doing something. But this is for everyone. And it will save a life. It'll save a family. It'll save a home. But more importantly, it'll save the future of our children and our grandchildren. So it is not one individual. It is up to us all, every one of us, to take this opportunity and not let the oxygen go out. Keep it pushing, keep asking. Ask everybody, why is this not out in the forefront? I can give you a list of people in RTE that I've notified, every newspaper, every radio station, LMFM, RTE, Red FM, Galway Bay FM, everyone, News Talk, the whole lot of them. Nobody is interested. And the bigger question is, why? Thanks very much for having me on, Stephen.
Well done, Tom. Fair play to you. Everybody should keep the pressure on now. Have a look at Tom's website, and we'll get Tom back hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Maybe Liam Egan, like you mentioned there, might be interested in joining. Tom might have some other suggestions as well. So thanks, Tom. Fair play to you. Well done for everything, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Cheers. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.